I wrote you on March 14th. Did you get my letter?
My office probably, my office got.
I didn't write your office. I wrote you. Did you receive my letter?
I have not read your letter.
You haven't read my letter.
I tried to speak to you Friday or yesterday.
You haven't read my letter.
I have.
The mail's not on time in Georgia. I'm a member of the Committee of Jurisdiction. You haven't read my letter. Well, that explains why I haven't received a response to my letter. March 14th, I wrote you with two specific questions. What update can you provide regarding the aforementioned reported issues at the Atlanta Regional Processing and Distribution Center in Palmetto? Question one. Question two, how is USPS currently communicating with customers in the metro Atlanta area reporting delayed and lost packages? You haven't read the letter?
So letters come in, people put stuff together to answer it and get.
Let me just give you just a friendly piece of advice. You should personally read letters from members of the U.S. Senate committee that funds and oversees your operations, particularly where you are failing abysmally to fulfill your core mission in my state. Mr. Zuckerberg, I want to begin by just asking a simple question, which is, do you want kids to use your platform more or less?
Well, we don't want people under the age of 13 using.
Do you want teenagers 13 and up to use your platform more or less?
Well, we would like to build a product that is useful and that people want to use more.
My time is going to be limited, so it's just, do you want them to use it more or less? Teenagers 13 to 17 years old, do you want them using Meta products more or less?
I'd like them to be useful enough that they want to use them more.
You want them to use it more. I think herein we have one of the fundamental challenges. In fact, you have a fiduciary obligation, do you not, to try to get kids to use your platform more?
It depends on how you define that.
All I'm trying to suggest to you, Mr. Zuckerberg, and my time is running short, is that in order for you to succeed, you and your colleagues here, we have to acknowledge these basic truths. We have to be able to come before the American people, the American public, the people in my state of Georgia, and acknowledge the internet is dangerous, including your platforms. There are predators lurking. There are drugs being sold. There are harms to mental health that are taking a huge toll on kids' quality of life. And yet you have this incentive, not just you, Mr. Zuckerberg, all of you have an incentive to boost, maximize use, utilization, and engagement. And that is where public policy has to step in to make sure that these platforms are safe for kids. So kids are not dying, so kids are not overdosing, so kids are not cutting themselves or killing themselves because they're spending all day scrolling instead of playing outside. No one, and I mean no one, is interested in or takes seriously lectures on border security from Senate Republicans. No one. In one of the most stunning acts of political cowardice in recent American history, a bipartisan border security bill co-authored by a conservative Republican member of this committee was put forward in the U.S. Senate. It would have tightened asylum standards to stop exploitation of the asylum system. It would have surged enforcement resources to the border. It would have meant more expedited removals of those who enter this country unlawfully. It would have empowered the federal government to take the fight to the drug cartels who are laying waste to communities across our country with fentanyl. A bipartisan border security bill co-authored by a conservative Republican member of this committee. And it wasn't just voted down by Senate Republicans, it was denied even a debate on the floor of the United States Senate because the former president of the United States, and he said this publicly, thought it wasn't in his political interest for the nation to be served. It wasn't in his political interest for a bipartisan border security bill to be enacted by Congress. The American people are smart, so all of the performative chest-pounding today on border security is utterly disingenuous.
No one in this body or the American government has suggested that Israel lay down its arms and be overrun, or that Israel does not have a right and indeed an obligation to defeat its enemies and defend its people. Rather, the United States has insisted that Israel's conduct of the war respect our interests and our values, the interests and values of Israel's closest ally. And yet, for the most part, this insistence has been ignored. The United States has been ignored in part because the Israeli Prime Minister is beholden to cabinet ministers in Mr. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir who insist there be no deviation from policies that are gratuitously brutal, even over American objections. We should be disgusted by the spectacle of Israeli extremists running amok in the West Bank, sometimes with the protection of Israeli security forces, shooting and maiming goat herders and olive farmers and burning and seizing their land. And the American people are rightly horrified by the lack of sufficient concern for innocent Palestinian life that has left so many children unnecessarily dead in Gaza, without limbs or riddled with shrapnel. As I said on the floor last year, no one should be naive to the inherent risk to civilians that comes with warfare in a place like Gaza against an enemy like Hamas. Tragically, horribly, fighting terrorists in a dense urban environment makes civilian casualties inevitable. And yet the evidence that force has repeatedly been applied with reckless disregard for the innocent is too credible for us to ignore. We are talking about precious, innocent children and other innocent civilians who might otherwise be alive or without grievous wounds today.
It's a simple question. Do you believe that 75% on-time delivery of mail in North Georgia is where we need to be?
50% of first-class mail in Georgia gets delivered a day in advance. We're in the 75 to low 80s on time, and 90% is the day after. While we're doing our transitions, okay, that's where we're going to be. That's one of the reasons why we have other types of service-related issues that are...
Yeah, my time is limited. Let me assure you that for my constituents in Georgia, the mail being delivered on time, 75% of the time, is not where we need to be. When you said 233 days ago that we would be where we need to be in 60 days.
Yeah.
Delivering for America plan projected positive net income for USPS starting in FY23. Is that right?
That's correct.
In FY23, you had a $6.5 billion loss, correct? In FY24, you had a $9.5 billion loss, correct?
Correct.
You had projected for FY24 a $1.7 billion gain, correct?
I don't remember.
Yeah, that's correct. Would you say that your tenure has been a success?
I would say that the 10-year plan has not reached what the plan said it would be, but I do believe...
Sorry, not your 10-year plan, your tenure. Has your tenure as Postmaster General been a success?
Senator, I know how you feel about me. You've been quite public, okay? So I'm not going to, debate that you think I'm a failure. Fine, I don't.
It's not about how I feel about you, Postmaster General. It's about whether or not seniors in Georgia are receiving prescriptions. It's the stacks of boxes of mail from courts that never arrived to their destination. It's the small businesses who are not able to get products to market and who are, this is my time, Postmaster General. You're here under oath before the U.S. Senate.
I know where I am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeJoy, core job of the Postal Service is to deliver mail and packages on time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Are mail and packages being delivered on time in Georgia today?
No, sir.
Why not?
We have had significant issues in terms of transitioning from 11 plants in the Atlanta area into 3.
Excuse me, could you speak into the microphone, please?
We've taken on a big, Atlanta has been one of our worst, the Georgia area has been one of our worst served areas over the last 10 years, mostly because we had 10, 12 different locations around the Atlanta area.
Mr. DeJoy, I don't want to talk about the last 10 years, I want to talk about the last 3 months.
All right, well,
do you know, since you made this shift to the new Palmetto facility, what % of outbound first-class mail was delivered on time in Atlanta?
It's a significantly lower number.
Yeah, 66%. Do you know what share of inbound mail first-class mail is delivered on time?
It's probably all a day late, so
Take a guess how much of it's on time.
35%.
You're pretty much there, 36%. 36% of the mail is being delivered on time to my constituents. What is the specific nature of the operational failure?
Well, the specific nature of the operate, we had to move 2,000 people from all these different plants into one location. We have strict requirements as to when they move. It's a big facility that we opened up. We have inbound transportation issues.
Yeah, but you knew it was going to be hard and complicated, right?
Yeah, and we tried to phase it in over several months, which we did, and we're gonna fix it. You're absolutely right.
When is it going to be fixed?
You will start seeing service improve. You should see it start now, and I think we'll get to where we need to be in about 60 days.
Do you think that one of your private sector competitors would have rolled out
Yeah, I
a
think
new,
they had the
hold on a
same.
second, Mr. Joy, a new system that would reduce on-time delivery to 36% and then say it's going to take months to fix it? Months?
Private businesses and taking on operations of this nature with the resources that we have do in fact have these types of problems.
You
Okay?
don't have months to fix 36% of the mail being
I didn't
delivered on
say
time. I've
yes.
got constituents with prescriptions that aren't being delivered. I've got constituents who can't pay their rent and their mortgages. I've got businesses who aren't able to ship products or receive supplies. And let me be clear, I think postal workers are out there every single day working their hearts out to deliver the mail on time. But if they don't have the infrastructure and the management competence overhead them to make a transition like this without drastically impairing the core function of the Postal Service, everyone in my state is losing. The amount of distress this is causing my constituents is massive. And I want to know what you are going to do, what specific steps you are going to take to fix this within 2 weeks.
So we have engaged over 50 different management executives on site. We're finishing up our staffing at at the remaining 3 locations. We are looking at our truck schedules, revamping our truck schedules. We are stabilizing the operation in terms of our machinery that we have deployed there. We are working better we have special teams down on site working on our docks, and we're working the rest of the transportation aspects of this that are causing a significant amount of problems. In the 2 plants where we did a lot of transfers, within the next 10 days, we should have them fully staffed. We had issues in terms of those transfers, so the team is working very hard, and I can assure you that in the long run, right, that you will have probably the best service in the country.
No, the long run is too long. You've got weeks, not months. You've got weeks, not months to fix this. And if you don't fix it, 36% on-time delivery, I don't think you're fit for this job. I yield to Senator Butler. It's self-evident that you have a fiduciary obligation to get your users, including users under 18, to use and engage with your platform more rather than less, correct?
Over the long term, but in the near term, we often take a lot of steps, including we made a change to show less videos that on the platform that reduced amount of time by more than 50 million
Okay,
hours.
but if your shareholders ask you, Mark, I wouldn't, Mr. Zuckerberg here, but your shareholders might be on a first-name basis with you. Mark, are you trying to get kids to use Meta products more or less? You'd say more, right?
Well, I would say that over the long term, we're trying to create the most
I mean,
value
let's look.
possible.
So the 10K you file with the SEC, a few things I want to note. Here are some quotes, and this is a filing that you signed, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Our financial performance has been and will continue to be significantly determined by our success in adding, retaining, and engaging active users. Here's another quote. If our users decrease their level of engagement with our products, our revenue, financial results, and business may be significantly harmed. Here's another quote. We believe that some users, particularly younger users, are aware of and actively engaging with other products and services similar to or as a substitute for ours. It continues, in the event that users increasingly engage with other products and services, we may experience a decline in use and engagement in key demographics or more broadly, in which case our business would likely be harmed. You have an obligation as the chief executive to encourage your team to get kids to use your platform more?
Senator,
Fundamental.
I think this is.
Is that not self-evident? You have
Well,
a
Senator,
fiduciary
I think it's
obligation to your
not-
shareholders
it's-
to get kids to use your platform more.
I think that the thing that's not intuitive is the direction is to make the products more useful, so that way people want to use them more. We don't give the teams running the Instagram feed or the Facebook feed a goal to increase the amount of time that people spend.
Yeah, but
We
you
give
don't
people
dispute,
goals.
and your 10K makes clear you want your users engaging more and using more the platform. And I think this gets to the root of the challenge, because it's the overwhelming view of the public, certainly in my home state of Georgia, and we've had some discussions about the underlying science, that this platform is harmful for children. I mean, you are familiar with, and not just your platform, by the way, social media in general. 2023 report from the Surgeon General about the impact of social media on kids' mental health, which cited evidence that kids who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media have double the risk of poor mental health outcomes, including depression and anxiety. Are you familiar with that Surgeon General report and the underlying study?
I read the report, yes.
Do you dispute it?
No, but I think it's important to characterize it correctly. I think what he was flagging in the report is that there seems to be a correlation, and obviously the mental health issue is very important, so it's something that needs to be
Yeah,
studied
we know.
further.
The thing is, that's everyone knows there's a correlation. Everyone knows that kids who spend a lot of time, too much time on your platforms are at risk. And it's not just the mental health issues. I mean, let me ask you another question. Is your platform safe for kids?
I believe it is, but there's an
Hold on a
important
second.
difference between
Let me
correlation and causation.
Because we're not going to be able to get anywhere. We want to work in a productive, open, honest, and collaborative way with the private sector to pass legislation that will protect Americans, that will protect American children above all, and that will allow businesses to thrive in this country. If we don't start with an open, honest, candid, realistic assessment of the issues, we can't do that. The first point is you want kids to use the platform more. In fact, you have an obligation to. But if you're not willing to acknowledge that it's a dangerous place for children, the internet is a dangerous place for children, not just your platform, isn't it? Isn't the internet a dangerous place for children?
I think it can be. Yeah, there's both great things that people can do, and there are harms that we need to work to
Yeah,
mitigate.
it's a dangerous place for children. There are families here who have lost their children. There are families across the country whose children have engaged in self-harm, who have experienced low self-esteem, who have been sold deadly pills on the internet. The internet's a dangerous place for children, and your platforms are dangerous places for children. Do you agree?
I think that there are harms that we need to work to mitigate.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to, I think overall
Why not?
there
Why
is-
not? Why not just acknowledge it? Why do we have to do the very
Well,
careful
I
code?
disagree with the characterization
Which character,
that you have.
that the internet's a dangerous place for children?
I think you're trying to characterize our products as inherently dangerous, and I think that
Inherent
first-
or not, your products are places where children can experience harm. They can experience harm to their mental health. They can be sold drugs. They can be preyed upon by predators. They're dangerous places. And yet, you have an obligation to promote the use of these platforms by children. And look, all I'm trying to suggest to you, Mr. Zuckerberg, and my time is running short, is that in order for you to succeed, you and your colleagues here, we have to acknowledge these basic truths. We have to be able to come before the American people, the American public, the people in my state of Georgia, and acknowledge the internet is dangerous, including your platforms. When Senate Republicans abrogated their basic governing responsibility and refused even to let us debate and amend that bipartisan border security proposal, the American people see that and understand that. But, Mr. Secretary, the American people also see and understand what's happening at the southern border. And just as they see the hypocrisy and cowardice of Senate Republicans on border security, they do not see success in the administration's handling of the crisis at the southern border. And I wonder if you have reckoned fully with the fact that you do not have a good faith partner in the minority party in Congress willing to work with you to advance bipartisan border security legislation. You are going to have to rely on your authorities, and it is past time to do so. So to the extent you have additional legal authorities that you can responsibly deploy to control this unacceptable crisis at the southern border that threatens our national security, it is long past time to do so. And that brings me to the budget request, because I can't understand this, Mr. Secretary. It's a $3 billion decrease from fiscal year 24 for CBP. You agree, I presume, that the situation of the southern border is a serious threat to U.S. national security?
I do, Senator. We
Okay, and that CBP personnel are essential to tackling this crisis, Mr. Secretary.
most certainly.
And the President recently commented publicly that there were not sufficient Customs and Border Patrol officers and agents at the border, correct?
We need more resources, and one of those resources is additional personnel, Senator.
So why are you requesting a $3 billion decrease in the CBP budget for FY25?
Senator, the construct that we have proposed is a baseline budget plus a $4.7 billion contingency fund, and I am not certain that you are accounting for that $4.7 billion contingency fund in the gross amount that we are requesting for fiscal year 2025. That contingency fund is really the model is that additional funds would be released to us based on the number of encounters that we experience at the southern border. And so that $4.7 billion must be included when looking at our fiscal year 2025 request.
Are those funds explicitly allocated and reserved for hiring and deploying CBP officers?
They include our ability
Yeah,
to hire
but it's
additional
funds
personnel.
that could be used for other purposes. I cannot, this is an insufficient request of the U.S. Congress, given the severity of what we're facing at the southern border.
I would be very, very pleased to work with this committee and the Congress on increasing the resources above and beyond that which has been requested.
So given the
Senator,
urgency of the need, why did you not request more funding for Customs and Border Patrol?
Senator, we work within the context of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. We continue to believe that the extraordinary resources that would have been delivered under the Senate's bipartisan legislation would have been transformative, not only in the provision of resources, but in the delivery of authorities that we currently do not
Yeah,
have.
and I agree with you, but President Trump killed the bill for political reasons, and it's gone. You don't have a good faith partner in the minority here. Only you, through the funds that you request and use from the Congress in the appropriations process, and by using those authorities that there's discussion of you exercising, only you have the power to address this crisis, and I urge you to act with utter urgency to do so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Madam President, I rise not in response to the senator from Utah or to address the matter being raised by Senator Paul, but to address the resolutions that were debated previously with respect to U.S. policy in the Middle East. And Mr. President, in 1982, as Israeli forces pursued the PLO deep into Lebanon, President Reagan was angered by what he viewed as excessive civilian casualties resulting from the Israeli bombardment of Beirut. Concerned by the suffering of innocent civilians and its impact on American diplomacy, not only did President Reagan personally call Israeli Prime Minister Begin and demand a halt to the bombing, and the bombing reportedly stopped within hours, but the American president then blocked the provision of cluster munitions to Israel out of concern that their use by the IDF was killing too many innocent people. President Reagan imposed conditions on the provision of U.S. arms, using leverage to influence the conduct of an ally. He took those steps to protect innocent life and to defend what he perceived to be America's interests. And Israel, faced by President Reagan's ultimatum, adjusted its policy to accommodate America's demands. The United States remained Israel's closest ally, and the world kept turning. This story is not a perfect mirror image for the agonizing situation we face today and have faced since the despicable Hamas attacks of October 7th. Today, Israel faces a multi-front assault by Iran and its proxies, while the war in Gaza has devastated the territory's civilian population. But I tell this story, Mr. President, to remind my colleagues that in the pursuit of America's national interests, to use the leverage that comes with the provision of arms, as President Reagan did in 1982, is not just sometimes necessary, it's expected and appropriate. The United States is and will remain Israel's closest ally. Our commitment to Israel's security is ironclad. But no foreign government is simply entitled as a matter of right to American weapons with no strings attached. No foreign government, no matter how close an ally, gets everything it wants, whenever it wants, to use however it wants. It is entirely appropriate for the United States to insist that foreign powers use American weapons consistent with our interests, our values, and our laws. And to insist otherwise weakens American foreign policy and undermines our ability to protect the interests of the American people. And to impose conditions on the provision of certain weapons to an ally, when necessary, is not a betrayal of that alliance. It is the pursuit of our national interest. Again, President Reagan understood that in 1982. So let's apply the principle to the present moment. In November of last year, I addressed the Senate on the war in Gaza. In the aftermath of the October 7th attack, affirming Israel's right to defend itself, to wage war against and defeat its enemies. And I affirmed, as I do again today, America's enduring support for our ally. I also urged that Israel respect American requests to reduce unnecessary civilian casualties in Gaza, to provide safe passage for food and essential medical supplies, to clearly define Israeli objectives, to present a credible plan for Gaza's future governance, and to prevent atrocities by Israeli extremists in the West Bank. These requests of the Israeli political leadership have been made not just by me and many others in the Senate, but repeatedly by the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, and the President over the past year. That Israel take these reasonable and necessary steps has been and remains in America's national interest. Mr. President, these things aren't just horrific, they're inconsistent with America's national security interests. Yet we seem to have forgotten that we have the power to influence our allies' conduct, and that we can do so without betraying our ally. It's often said that our efforts to influence close allies are best done in private and, where possible, done gently. And I agree. But in this case, that has not been sufficient, nor have heartfelt public statements and harshly worded letters been effective. So what would President Reagan do? Judging by his actions 40 years ago, I think he would judiciously use the power that comes with our provision of weapons in order to shape Israel's conduct. Some have taken to the floor tonight to argue that holding up 2 or 3 arms sales today would have been an abandonment of our ally, leaving Israel naked and undefended in the face of Iranian aggression. And that's nonsense. The question on the floor today was not whether to shut off military support for Israel. The resolutions we debated accounted for less than 5% of American arms that will likely flow to Israel over the next 3 years, and most of the shipments debated will not even arrive until 2026 or 27. Bipartisan American support for Israel's non-negotiable right to exist and to defend itself is rock solid. Had these resolutions passed, however, perhaps Israeli politicians would have received the necessary message that has so far been disregarded, which is, yes, defend yourself. Yes, defeat your enemies. But have mercy for the innocent. Restrain your own extremists. And respect the interests of the United States. The realization that every shipment is not simply available on an unlimited basis with no strings attached might have resulted in changes to Israeli policy that would reduce civilian suffering and support America's regional and global interests, as he believed it would when President Reagan used American power in 1982. I remain steadfastly committed to the U.S.-Israel alliance, and I also believe we must be willing to say no, even to our closest friends, when we believe it is in America's national interest. And I yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Postmaster General, prior to your efforts to implement Delivering for America and move to the Palmetto facility in Georgia, on-time delivery for first-class mail in North Georgia was over 90%, correct?
Not so.
Not so? What was on-time first-class mail delivery in Georgia prior to the changes that you implemented at Palmetto?
So Atlanta was always in the bottom 20% of our service standard across the nation.
My question is, what percentage of
I don't
first-class
remember.
mail?
It's probably in the low 80s. A single-piece first-class mail was definitely in the low 80s.
In the midst of the changes that you implemented mid-spring, that declined to 36%, correct?
We've been through this. Yes, it has.
We've been through this. Well, we're going through it again.
Okay, let's go.
On-time delivery of first-class mail in Metro Atlanta and North Georgia, late spring, was 36%, correct?
That is correct.
You said at the hearing in April that we would be, quote, where we need to be in about 60 days, correct?
I believe so. Yep.
It's been 233 days. Sound right?
I don't
It's
know.
been 233 days. On-time delivery of first-class mail in Metro Atlanta, North Georgia is now at 75%, correct? Are we where we need to be?
Where we're going to be for a little bit, yes.
It's small businesses who can't operate. It's death notices not delivered to family members. And you're sitting here trying to explain that 75% on-time delivery is a success. And it's not. It's not about how I feel about you, Postmaster General. It's how my constituents are being served by the United States Postal Service. Let me ask you a question about the Palmetto facility in Georgia. Have there been any deaths in the Palmetto facility in the last year?
Any deaths?
Deaths.
I have a lot of events throughout the course of the year. I don't remember specific. I have a lot of deaths throughout the course of the year. I don't remember specifically Palmetto. No.
How many deaths of personnel on the job would you say you've had nationwide in the last year?
We probably see 10. Course of the year.
Well, you had a death in the Palmetto facility last year. Will you provide my office and this committee with all materials relevant to that death?
Absolutely.
When will on-time mail delivery be restored to the level prior to you trying to make these changes for my constituents in Georgia? You said in April we'd be where we need to be in 60
Well, first
days.
of all, I disagree with the premise because the service is probably at the level of service where you were before I started these changes, right?
We're not.
Yes, we are.
I've got the numbers in front of me. We're not.
I don't know what numbers you got. But
I've got your on-time delivery statistics.
But-
You're not where you were before you tried to make this change in Georgia. You're at 75% on-time delivery in Georgia. So when will you be?
We started, you said the Delivering for America plan. When we started the Delivering for America plan, service in Georgia was terrible. Aspects of the Delivering for America plan brought that service up. We were close to the 90s across the board. That was part of the Delivering for America plan. When we opened the new plant is when we had our issues. Service went down, and we're recovering from it now. And it's part of, when we get to where we want to be, it's going to be part of the whole broad filing that we have with the PRC right now, where some of the service business rules that are 30 years old that should have been changed are affecting how we measure service. So there's a bunch of other things that need to come together to get the service where it is. In all, service in Georgia is within less than 3 days, people get all their mail packages and everything, right? And that will be what, you know, that will be the target, what we're trying to shoot
You
for.
just lowered your targets for next year, correct?
I lowered the targets for next year to put that, what I just said, out into the public, that this is what it's going to look like.
You lowered your targets for next year so you could meet your targets.
so I can make the changes that we need to make to provide a viable United States Postal Service.
Well, Postmaster General, you're not meeting your financial targets. You're hemorrhaging cash when you said you'd be making money. Delivery in Georgia has been abysmal this year. You have not recovered, as you said you would. You need to do better for my constituents in Georgia.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Congresswoman, Mr. Zollers, Mr. Hartogensis, congratulations on your nominations. I want to discuss accountability. Just if I could, by a show of hands, how many of you have had to fire somebody? All three. Are you prepared, if there is cause, as members of this board, to terminate any Postmaster General if necessary? Ms. Demings.
Senator, thank you for that. And yes, I've been in the position of having to hire and terminate. And termination is based on performance. And when you're not meeting the core mission of the institution, you don't deserve to remain in your job. If you are working along with the other stakeholders to meet the core mission of the organization, you deserve to keep your job. And as the governor, I will be clear about both.
Yeah, in my case, Senator, I also have a lot of experience, unfortunately, in letting people go. I think, to be clear about what we do at the Board of Governors, we do set annual goals for the Postmaster General, and we track those goals on a quarterly basis and give him feedback along the way on how he's doing against those goals. When I left a year ago, there was tremendous support for the DFA and for the Postmaster General. So I'm not sure that anything has changed. But if it was obvious that the Postmaster General needed to be replaced, that's one of our primary responsibilities, is to hire and fire the Postmaster General, and we take that very seriously.
The short answer is yes. I think there are a few criterion where the Board of Governors should act with the Postmaster General. One is lack of performance based on the milestones. Another one is failure to learn from mistakes. And mistakes will happen if it seems like the same things are being repeated without learning. And the last one is lack of transparency to us, to Congress, to if we feel like the management is hiding things, sweeping things under the rug, that's cause for termination.
Thank you all. Let's talk about USPS performance in my state. As of late spring, on-time delivery of first-class mail in North Georgia was at 36%. And as you all know, that means seniors aren't receiving their prescriptions. It means small businesses aren't receiving supplies and can't get products to market. It means that vital court correspondence, notices to appear, notices of eviction are not being received by citizens. Postmaster General came here to this room and acknowledged that USPS was failing my constituents in Georgia. Mr. Zollers, you were on the board at the time that some of these changes were being planned. Why did USPS, why has USPS, as the PMG acknowledged, failed my constituents?
Yeah, I was not there, but I think the primary impact was the Atlanta consolidation, and I was not on the board when that was executed. I can tell you that we made some changes. We had a bit of a problem in Richmond, backed off that one when I was on the board through conversations with the Postmaster General. I can't speak specifically to what happened in the Atlanta consolidation. I'm aware that there were issues. That's obviously not where we want to be in terms of performance. We should be at 95% on time for all of our products. And so that's something that we would strive to try and get to in Georgia. I have family in Georgia.
Yeah, but you are intimately aware of and were on the board when this Delivering for America plan, which included the consolidation to regional distribution centers, was being planned.
That's correct.
So
I don't think the problem was with the...
Why has the implementation of that plan based upon your extensive and deep knowledge of that plan and your role in developing it? Why did it lead to what is undeniably abysmal failure to serve my constituents in Georgia?
We had obviously execution problems. I'm not sure that the plan was necessarily the bigger part of the issue. I think more of it was execution. I don't really know the details about what went wrong with the execution, so I can't really speak thoughtfully to that.
Serious execution problems. I sat in a room full of USPS executives at that Palmetto facility, and I asked a very simple question. Who was in charge of executing this? There was silence. No one was in charge of executing this. As you all know from your management experience, when no one is in charge and no one has primary responsibility for executing a challenging and complex task, it is unlikely to be done successfully. How is it possible, Mr. Zollers, that this organization failed to make one person responsible for the execution of something so complex?
I really can't account for that.
Will you look into it deeply should you be confirmed and report back to me?
I certainly can, yes.
Will all three of you commit that, should I call you or request a meeting for information about the performance of USPS in Georgia, that you will return my call within a day and meet with you within a week?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure.
The Postmaster General does not personally read the mail that I send him, will you?
Yes.
Yes, I will.
Of course.
Let's talk about data. There's been some apparent improvement since the Postmaster General came under harsh and bipartisan pressure in Congress to improve USPS performance in Georgia. But I have some questions about the integrity of data that USPS reports to the public and to Congress. Will you provide me, my office, and this committee with any and all relevant information that will reveal how these numbers are crunched and what they mean?
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.